We're gonna build a backcountry DIY Brita filter, okay? Before we do this, I wanna talk about a couple of things, and then we'll just dive right in. This is something that should hopefully kind of get you outside and playing in the dirt and getting dirty and ultimately learning something. So basically the way a Brita filter and really any air filter system works is that you have these progressively more finer and finer layers of material. And typically even in air filters and water filters both, you have charcoal as sort of the base. So if you've ever had a Brita pitcher and you'll start finding little black spots in there, I don't know if anybody's ever seen that before, but those are typically little chunks of charcoal. They're harmless and they are critical in filtration process. So a filter, particularly like a Brita filter and the one we're gonna do today, is gonna utilize charcoal, which is super fine, and we're gonna use some tools to help with that, or at least we're gonna do our best. I'm gonna show you some backcountry ways. Because ultimately, if you come upon some big old grungy pond, we need to do two things. We need to filter it, but we also need to boil it. So we're gonna build a way to filter into a boilable container. So this is sort of step one, and then step two is always boil your water whenever you can. So I want to talk about containers here for a minute because I know a lot of folks have all sorts of fancy water bottles and containers. How about your Nalgene there? And those are definitely pretty handy tools. However, if you're caught in a DIY situation and you need to boil water or you need to modify a container, which some of you might recognize this is basically a Gatorade bottle. These are super handy. They got a nice little dealy here to hold on to, but also you can't really modify this. It is a little bit limiting. It's also heavy, believe it or not, and so I'm a big fan of these Gatorade bottles and reusing these plastic containers for a number of reasons. They are ridiculously light. This is vastly lighter than this Nalgene bottle. It holds the same amount of water, and I can get fancy and tie string around it, and I can do other things to make it carryable, but ultimately I can destroy this and I'm not out any money. I can go to the gas station, get another one. So these are super handy, and you can build these filters out of any kind of container like that. So I just want to sing the virtues of reusing things and also how ridiculously light these are. So what we're going to do is we are going to take the Gatorade bottle, or you can use a water container like this, and we're going to cut the bottom off of it. And then we are going to start with a layer of charcoal. Actually, I'm sorry, we're gonna start with a paper towel. You can also, for your first layer, you can use a sock or like a t-shirt. So if you're in a survival situation, you can just kind of rip up some clothing if you need to. Or, you know, for whatever reason, if you have like a coffee filter with you. Really the idea is you're creating like a layer that is porous. Here's your word for the day. But also is gonna catch everything and keep it in the bottle, okay? So paper towel is really all you need, or like a wadded up dish rag or something. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna put that in, and then we're gonna put in some charcoal, and then we're gonna put in some sand. And so I have some things here. I've got some charcoal, I've got some sand, and I've got some gravel. And I'm gonna show you some ways to kind of get a hold of this stuff. But ultimately, we all live close to the river. You can probably go down to the river and find some sand. Ultimately, you know, do your best. If you have a strainer, that's probably the best way to do this because you can take dirt. That's how I got this sand. We went down to the beach and then strained it even further. So you can find this stuff, but ultimately understanding the principle, giving it your best shot, that's sort of the key here. So first step is you are going to take a knife or some sort of sharp object. If you've got a pocket knife or like a Leatherman or something, what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut the bottom of this off, and we are going to salvage that and use it a little bit later. So the idea is we're cutting off the end here. Be careful, depending especially on, like if you're using one of these guys, they're super flimsy. So just be careful when you're popping your knife in there. A Gatorade bottle has a little more resistance. So I recommend starting with a knife, and then once you get the hole, use your scissors. I believe we are not supposed to use our kitchen shears though, correct? Is that right?
Yeah,
no kitchen
kitchen knives.
Don't use your kitchen knife. Don't use your good stuff. Use a pocket knife. And like I said, get your hole started. You can finish it with the knife, but I would recommend, in the interest of safety, use a pair of scissors. This is why having a Leatherman or some sort of pocket tool is a good idea. Because let's just focus on water and not like first aid right now. We don't want to add to the problem. So we're going to cut the bottom of this thing off and we're going to save it. It also makes a handy little digging tool for digging your materials out. Okay, so depending on how wide your hole is on your bottle, like if you've got a Gatorade bottle here, it's got a pretty decent sized hole. These are quite a bit smaller. So I think for these smaller ones, maybe like one paper towel and fold it up a couple different ways, you know, hot dog style, hamburger style, whatever works. It's not too big of a deal if it's a little thick, because ultimately water will go through this, and any extra layer of filtering is good, right? So, but if you go overkill and make it too thick, then you're sort of wasting space, and really charcoal and sand is our goal, okay? So just do your best, you know, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna ram this down in there and sort of cover the hole. So if you need to, you know, you can just rip this up a little bit and jam it down in there, okay? If you need to use like a stick or something, or your scissors are long enough to kind of get it down in there, you do want it to be inside the hole a little bit. So just kind of ram it down in there, and then we're good to go. Okay, so we've got our plug. Now it's time to start filling. The first thing we want to do is we want to start with charcoal, okay? Charcoal can be a little tricky to find, and it's not a bad idea to carry a charcoal briquette with you. They are flammable, they can keep a fire going, and they take up no space, and they're super light. And then you can grind it up using a hatchet or a rock or something, which is basically what I did. You can also start a fire and then create your own. That's actually what we have here, is bona fide charcoal from the fire we had out back yesterday. So, and I'm just taking a rock, and I have like a tin plate here just to provide some rigidity, and I'm just grinding the heck out of this stuff, okay? And you want to get this stuff down to a powder, and this is where, for your project, we have a sifter here, or a strainer, I'm sorry. And this is where you want to use your strainer to get this stuff down to just like as powder form as possible, okay? Because the finer this is, the better your filtering is going to be, okay? So you want to get these chunks all ground down, and you want to get this down into powder form before we start cramming it in here, okay? Once you get it to powder form, we can start filling our Brita filter, okay? It's going to be a little messy. This stuff definitely gets all over. This is soot, right? It's basically the same thing. So you're going to just jam this stuff down in here. We don't need to pack it or anything. And in the interest of demonstration and time, there might be some chunks in here that probably should be a little bit finer, but I think you get the idea, and we could use the strainer here. What I will say is that the finer this gets, the smokier it gets. So probably do this outside, because it will kind of create dust and soot and a lot of cleanup if you do it indoors. So you're gonna keep putting charcoal in here, and the more the better. Like, we don't want to go all charcoal, because then you pour water in, it just turns into mud, and then we're back to square one, okay? But I would say like maybe a third of the bottle we're gonna do with charcoal. You're just gonna keep putting this charcoal in here. There's no need to cram it down. We don't need to pack it. The water's gonna help with that, okay? So once we get a solid like third, all right, so here's where they fast forward the video. Speed things up. All right, cool. So then we've got a third of our bottle filled, and now we're gonna move on to sand, okay? And sand can be a little tricky to find out in the backcountry, but you wanna do your best to try and find something super fine. And a couple ways you can do that for your project, or find some dirt. That's essentially what we did. We went down to the water down there, found some dirt, ran it through the sifter, and got some really fine sand. Like a little pink pail and shovel. My Little Pony on it. Is that still a thing?
Thing. Oh yeah.
You are struggling to find some bona fide sand. That's where you might go heavier on the charcoal, okay? But it's critical that we have layers that are finer and finer and finer. So find yourself some sand, go down to the river, do your best, find yourself a strainer, and we start putting in sand next, okay? So, can you grab me a spoon? Oh, no. We have our shovel here. We have our scooper, right? So we're gonna use this and we're gonna fill this maybe, I don't know, let's say another third with sand, okay? We wanna leave quite a bit of room at the top for two reasons. And we're gonna actually add a layer of gravel, and we're going to add a layer of, we're gonna use our scooper as like a splash guard, okay? So we're gonna fill this up the remainder, like maybe another third. I wish I had taken the wrapper off, but you see, I think you can see it here. We've got charcoal, we've got sand, and we've still got some room here. And the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna use some gravel, just some, like not sand, but not big rocks. We don't wanna have big voids with rocks, because then that's like less material, it's filtering, right? So the last level, and I would say just like, I don't know, like maybe a fingertip length, is gonna be gravel. And the purpose of the gravel is twofold. It's gonna start by sort of getting the big stuff, like the bugs and big chunks of grass. So it is a level of filtering, but it's also gonna help against splashing, because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pour water in this thing, and if I pour water right onto sand, this thing's toast. If I pour water right onto charcoal, it's toast. So this is gonna help to kind of keep from splashing. So it's tough to tell the difference between the sand and the gravel here, but you know, I'm doing about that much there. You wanna leave a little room on the top so that you can put water in here. It takes some time for the water to make its way through, but we wanna have just a little bit on top, okay? So I think we're pretty much good to go. Depending on what kind of bottle you have, sometimes this will go right back inside, like that. And sometimes if you have like a Gatorade bottle, you need to do a little bit of trimming. But the idea is we're gonna do one last little layer of protection, and this is gonna keep it from splashing and turning into mud. Okay, now it's time to test our bottle. So we're gonna take some water and we're gonna put it right on in there. And depending on how good the camera is and how close you are, you can actually start seeing this make its way through. And what we want to do is we want to catch that in some sort of pot that we can now sterilize in, whether it's a bottle that I can fit my SteriPen in, whether it's our backpacking deal, whatever it is. We want to find some way to catch this that we can then transport it into our container, okay? So it may take a little bit of time for the water to make its way through, but you see I leave a little bit of room so I can kind of put some water in there, and you can actually watch it sort of make its way down. And I can feel it, yep, there it goes. Okay, so now we have, I don't know if you can see this in both of them. Now we have water, and this is, again, filtered water. We're not gonna go straight into drinking this. We wanna definitely boil this, but this should have filtered out quite a bit of scum, okay? And that's the project. So do your best on that. Again, the tricky part could be getting a hold of charcoal, but you can use briquettes and a hammer. And again, just hammer the heck out of it, turn it into powder. Don't use a food processor. We learned that lesson. If you have any questions, let us know. But ultimately, this is some real world stuff that's pretty easy to build, especially if you have just a simple plastic bottle in your backpack.